What if the person you trusted with your soul was the one who sold you to save his throne? Imagine this. You give him your heart, your life, your forever. Moonlit kisses, whispered vows, the kind of love that makes the world feel safe. Then one night, he looks you in the eyes and trades you like a bargaining chip to his worst enemies. How does that feel? Would your heart shatter? Or would it finally wake up? Because that betrayal didn't break her. It forged her. She became the woman who would walk through fire, learn to love her own scars, and one day stand over the ruins of the kingdom that once owned her. And smile. So tell me, right now honestly, if the man you loved handed you over to save his crown, would you beg to come back? Or would you become the storm that burns it all down? Chapter 1. The Moonlit Vow. The full moon hung low over the ancient forest of Eldoria, casting silver threads through the canopy like whispered secrets. Leora stood at the edge of the sacred clearing, her heart pounding with a mix of exhilaration and trepidation. The air was thick with the scent of pine and wild jasmine, but beneath it all lingered the primal musk of her pack, the Silver Claws. She was no ordinary wolf. Born under a blood moon, her fur gleamed like polished obsidian, and her eyes held the storm of untamed power. Yet tonight, she felt vulnerable, exposed, as if the moon itself were peeling back her layers. Darius, the alpha king of the Silver Claws, approached her with the grace of a predator who knew he owned the night. His broad shoulders strained against his tunic, muscles honed from years of battles and hunts. His golden eyes locked onto hers, burning with an intensity that made her knees weaken. "Leora," he murmured, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through her bones. "You are my moon, my light in the endless dark." He reached out, his fingers tracing the curve of her jaw, sending sparks of heat dancing across her skin. She leaned into his touch, her breath catching as his thumb brushed her lower lip. They had been fated mates since the first time. Their eyes met during the great hunt. Darius had claimed her not with force, but with a tenderness that belied his ruthless reputation. He was the king who had united fractured packs, forging an empire from blood and loyalty, and she was his queen, his confidant, the one who soothed his savage heart. "I trust you with my life," she whispered, her voice trembling with the weight of her words. It was more than a vow. It was her soul laid bare. In a world where betrayal lurked in every shadow, where rival packs like the Shadowfangs circled like vultures, Darius was her anchor. He pulled her close, his arms enveloping her in warmth that chased away the chill of the night. Their lips met in a kiss that started soft, exploratory, like the first raindrop of a storm. But passion ignited quickly, as it always did between them. His hands roamed down her back, pressing her against him, the hard planes of his body molding to her softer curves. She gasped as his mouth trailed to her neck, nipping gently at the sensitive spot where her pulse raced. "You are mine," he growled, his breath hot against her skin, "and I am yours forever." Leora's fingers tangled in his dark hair, pulling him closer. The kiss deepened, tongues dancing in a rhythm that mirrored the wild beat of their hearts. Heat pooled in her core, a delicious ache that made her arch into him. His hand slid lower, cupping her hips, lifting her slightly off the ground as if she weighed nothing. She wrapped her legs around his waist, feeling the evidence of his desire press against her. A soft moan escaped her lips, muffled by his kiss. The world faded, the forest, the moon, the distant howls, until there was only them, lost in a haze of need and love. But even in this bliss, a shadow lingered in Darius's eyes, one Leora chose to ignore. The kingdom was crumbling. Whispers of rebellion stirred among the packs, and the Shadowfangs, led by the cunning Alpha Thorn, no, wait, not that name. Led by the ruthless Alpha Victor grew bolder. Darius had confided in her about the mounting threats, the spies in their midst, the fragile alliances. "I would do anything to protect our crown," he had said once, his voice laced with determination. She had smiled then, proud of his strength, never imagining the cost. As they broke apart, breathless and flushed, Darius set her down gently. "The council awaits," he said, his tone shifting to the regal command of a king. The mating ceremony was tonight, a public declaration that would solidify their bond and his rule. Leora nodded, her heart swelling with joy. She slipped her hand into his, feeling the calluses from his claws, a reminder of the beast within. Together they walked toward the grand hall, where torches flickered like stars fallen to earth. The hall was alive with the pack's elite, warriors with scars telling tales of glory, elders with wisdom etched in their furrowed brows, and young wolves eager for the future. Leora stood tall beside Darius on the dais, her gown of midnight silk clinging to her form, accentuating the swell of her breasts and the curve of her waist. He placed the silver crown upon her head, its weight a symbol of their shared destiny. "With this I bind you to me," he declared, his voice echoing. The pack howled in approval, a chorus that vibrated through her very soul. But as the night wore on, feasting and dancing under the moon's gaze, Leora noticed Darius's distraction. His smiles were forced, his touches brief. When he excused himself to meet with advisors, she followed discreetly, her wolf senses sharpening. Hidden in the shadows, she overheard fragments. "The Shadowfangs demand tribute. Our borders weaken. A sacrifice must be made." Her blood ran cold. Sacrifice? What did he mean? She confronted him later, in the privacy of their chambers. The room was dimly lit by candles, the bed inviting with its fur throws. Darius pulled her into his arms again, but this time his embrace felt desperate. "Trust me, my love," he pleaded, his lips crashing against hers with urgency. She melted into him, her doubts dissolving in the fire of his passion. He lifted her onto the bed, his hands exploring her body with reverence and hunger. "You are everything," he whispered, peeling away her gown to reveal her bare skin. His mouth followed, kissing a trail down her collarbone, lingering on the peak of her breast. Leora arched, a whimper escaping as his tongue teased her nipple, sending jolts of pleasure through her. His fingers dipped lower, finding her wet and ready, stroking her with expert precision. "Darius," she moaned, her nails digging into his back, urging him on. He shed his clothes swiftly, his arousal evident and throbbing. Positioning himself between her thighs, he entered her slowly, savoring the connection. Their bodies moved in sync, a dance of love and lust. Each thrust built the tension, her walls clenching around him, drawing out groans from deep in his chest. The room filled with their shared breaths, the slap of skin, the crescendo of ecstasy. As they climaxed together, waves of pleasure crashing over them, Leora felt a profound happiness. A smile tugging at her lips even as tears of joy pricked her eyes. This was love, raw and real. But in the afterglow, as she lay in his arms, Darius's face darkened. "The council has decided," he said softly, his voice pained. "To save the kingdom, we must appease Victor. They demand you." Leora's world shattered. "Me?" she whispered, pain slicing through her like claws. He couldn't meet her eyes. "It's temporary. A hostage exchange to buy peace. I have no choice, the crown, our people." Betrayal burned in her chest, hot and agonizing. She had trusted him with her life, and he was selling her to the enemies. Tears streamed down her face, a mix of sorrow and rage. Yet in that moment, a spark ignited, a fierce determination. This pain would not break her. It would remake her. As guards dragged her away at dawn, Leora's last glance at Darius was filled with a sad smile. "You created this," she thought, her heart aching with lost love. But deep down, a twisted happiness bloomed. She would return, stronger, and his kingdom would feel her wrath. Chapter 2: Shadows of Captivity. The iron gates of Victor's fortress clanged shut behind her like the jaws of fate itself. Dawn had barely broken, painting the sky in bruised purples and grays, when Leora was marched through the shadowed corridors of Blackthorn. "Keep!" Chains bit into her wrists, not silver, thankfully, but cold steel that reminded her every second of her fall. Her midnight gown, once flowing and regal, now hung torn and dirt-streaked, clinging to her skin like a lover's regret. She kept her head high, refusing to let the guards see the tremor in her lips or the way her heart cracked anew with every step. Darius's face haunted her. Those golden eyes, once full of adoration, now etched with guilt as he turned away. "It's temporary," he'd whispered. "Lies, all of it." The pain was a living thing inside her chest, sharp and relentless. Yet beneath it simmered something dangerous, a quiet, burning smile of realization. He had sold her to save his crown. In doing so, he had freed something wilder in her soul. Victor waited in the great hall, lounging on a throne carved from obsidian and wolf bone. He was everything the rumors painted. Tall, broad-shouldered, with hair the color of midnight storms and eyes like molten amber. Predatory, unyielding, yet strangely searching. His scent hit her first. Smoke, leather, and something darker, more primal than Darius's clean pine and moonlight essence. It wrapped around her, invasive, intoxicating. "So," Victor drawled, rising slowly, "the Silverclaw Queen arrives. Or should I say, former queen." His voice was velvet over steel, low enough to vibrate through her bones. Leora met his gaze without flinching. "I am no one's former anything. You may have my body in chains, but my spirit remains mine." A slow, dangerous smile curved his lips. "We'll see about that." He gestured, and the guards shoved her forward. She stumbled but caught herself, refusing to kneel. Victor circled her like a wolf sizing up prey, close enough that she felt the heat radiating from him. His fingers brushed a stray lock of hair from her face, gentle, almost tender, and the touch sent an unwelcome shiver down her spine. "Take her to the lower chambers," he ordered. "Clean her, feed her. I want her presentable." The lower chambers were not the dank dungeon she'd feared. Instead, a cavernous stone room opened to a steaming pool fed by underground springs, lit by flickering torches and shafts of pale moonlight filtering through high slits. Guards unchained her wrists, though iron manacles remained at her ankles. A female attendant, silent, eyes downcast, helped her out of the ruined gown. Leora stood naked under the cool air, arms crossed over her breasts, dignity her only armor. Then Victor entered. He wore only loose trousers, chest bare and scarred from countless battles, muscles shifting like coiled power beneath his skin. Steam curled around him as he approached the pool. "Leave us," he told the attendant. She fled without a word. Leora tensed. "If you think—" "Peace," he said softly, raising a hand. "I have no intention of forcing anything tonight. But you stink of Silverclaw arrogance and betrayal. Wash it off." He stepped into the water first, the surface rippling around his hips. Leora hesitated, pride warring with exhaustion. The water called to her. Warm, soothing, promising relief for aching muscles. Slowly, she descended the steps, the heat enveloping her like an embrace she didn't want to crave. Victor kept distance at first, letting her submerge, letting the water lap at her shoulders. But then he moved closer, a sponge in hand. "Turn," he murmured. She did, back to him, vulnerable. His touch was careful, almost reverent, as he washed the grime from her skin. Fingers trailed along her spine, slow circles that made her breath hitch. Sadness welled up. This gentleness felt like mockery after Darius's desperate passion. Yet the pain twisted strangely, blooming into heat low in her belly. His hands slid to her shoulders, thumbs pressing into tense muscles, kneading until she bit back a sigh. "You tremble," he observed, voice husky. "Fear, or something else?" "Anger," she lied, but her voice cracked. His chuckle was low, intimate. "Liar." He turned her gently to face him. Water streamed down her body, droplets catching moonlight on her breasts. Victor's gaze darkened, tracing every curve with raw hunger, yet he didn't touch. Not yet. Instead, he lifted a handful of water, letting it cascade over her collarbone, watching it trail between her breasts. "You trusted him," Victor said quietly, almost sadly. "With everything. And he handed you over like a bargaining chip." Tears pricked her eyes, hot, furious. "Don't speak his name." "I won't. But I will speak truth." His hand cupped her cheek, thumb brushing away a tear that escaped. He thought he was saving his kingdom. Instead, he woke a storm. Leora searched his face, finding no cruelty there, only a shadowed understanding, as if he too had known betrayal. Her hand rose, almost of its own accord, pressing against his chest. His heart thundered beneath her palm, strong and steady. The contact sparked electricity between them, painful in its sweetness. She wanted to hate him, this enemy who now held her life. Yet his nearness stirred something forgotten, desire untainted by lies. Victor's fingers slid into her wet hair, tilting her head back, their faces inches apart, breaths mingling in the steam. "I could take you now," he whispered, lips brushing her ear. "Claim what he discarded. But I want more than your body, Leora. I want the fire he tried to extinguish. She shivered. Not from cold. Her nipples tightened under his gaze, aching. The water lapped at them both as he drew her closer, bodies brushing, his hardness pressing against her thigh through thin fabric. A soft gasp escaped her. His mouth hovered over hers, teasing, promising. Then he pulled back, eyes blazing. Not tonight. When you come to me, it will be because you choose it. Because the pain he left has burned away everything but want. He stepped out of the pool, water sluicing off him, leaving her breathless and aching. Alone now, Leora sank deeper into the warmth, fingers trailing her own skin where his had been. Tears fell freely, sad for the love she'd lost, painful for the humiliation, yet a small, secret smile curved her lips. Victor saw her, not as a prize, but as a force, and in that recognition, something inside her began to heal and sharpen. Later, in the dim light of her guarded chamber, she lay on furs, staring at the moon through barred windows. A guard slipped a note under the door, Darius's seal. Her fingers shook as she opened it. My love, forgive me. This is temporary. I will come for you. Hold on. She crumpled it, heart twisting. Sadness crashed over her like a wave, memories of their nights flooding back, his tender kisses, his desperate thrusts, the way he'd whispered forever against her skin. Pain lanced deep. Yet she felt a quiet, fierce happiness, too. She was no longer the trusting queen. She was becoming something more. Footsteps echoed outside. Victor appeared in the doorway, silhouetted against torchlight. Sleep, little storm, he said softly. Tomorrow we begin your true education. As the door closed, Leora touched the spot on her cheek where he'd brushed away her tear. A spark of anticipation flickered amid the grief. She trusted Darius with her life once. Now, she trusted only herself, and perhaps, dangerously, the enemy who saw her worth. But in the shadows of Blackthorn Keep, whispers stirred. Darius's spies had infiltrated the outer walls. They carried messages of rescue, or retribution. Leora closed her eyes, a single tear slipping free, yet her lips curved in a small, dangerous smile. The game had only just begun. Chapter 3. Whispers of Rebellion. Leora did not sleep. The furs beneath her were soft, almost mocking in their comfort, but her mind refused to quiet. Victor's parting words echoed in the dark. Tomorrow, we begin your true education, and Darius's crumpled note burned against her palm like a brand. She turned the parchment over and over, tracing the familiar slant of his handwriting, until the ink blurred beneath, the salt of unshed tears. Hold on. She almost laughed, a small, broken sound that died in her throat. Hold on to what? The memory of his mouth on hers in the moonlight? The way he used to cradle her face as though she were made of glass and starlight? Or the moment he looked away while the guards took her wrists? The pain was not loud anymore. It had settled deep, a dull, constant ache beneath her ribs, the kind that made every breath feel borrowed. And yet, strangely, it no longer felt like drowning. It felt like kindling. She rose before first light. The chamber door was unlocked. Another deliberate choice from Victor, she suspected. He wanted her to wander, to test, to choose movement over surrender. Barefoot, she slipped into the corridor, the stone cool against her soles. Blackthorn Keep was not beautiful like the Silverclaw halls. It was honest. Rough-hewn walls, iron sconces spitting low flames, tapestries depicting ancient battles where no one smiled in victory. Every corner smelled faintly of smoke and wet earth and something alive, something that watched. She found the training yard by following the sound of steel. Dawn was gray and thin when she stepped into the open air. A handful of Shadowfang warriors were already moving through forms, slow, deliberate, lethal. At the far end stood Victor, shirtless despite the morning chill, wooden practice blade in hand. He was sparring with a younger wolf, a lean female with cropped silver hair and eyes like chipped flint. They moved like water over stone, fast, unhurried, inevitable. Leora stayed in the shadow of an archway, watching. Victor's body told stories his voice never would. Scars laced his back and ribs, old claw marks, blade kisses, burns that had healed unevenly. Yet he moved without hesitation, without apology. when the silver-haired warrior lunged. He caught her wrist, twisted, sent her sprawling with controlled grace. Then he offered a hand. She took it. They nodded once. Respect, not pity. Something tight in Leora's chest loosened. She stepped into the light. Heads turned. Conversation died. Victor's gaze found her immediately. Amber eyes narrowing, not in surprise but in recognition, as though he had been waiting for this exact moment. "You're early," he said. "I couldn't sleep," she answered simply. A murmur rippled through the yard. Someone laughed low. Victor silenced them with a glance. He tossed the practice blade aside and gestured to a rack of wooden weapons. "Choose." Leora walked forward, aware of every eye on her. She selected a shorter blade, light, balanced for speed rather than brute force. When she turned, Victor was already in the center of the ring, empty-handed. "No weapon?" she asked. "I don't need one to teach you." The words should have stung. Instead, they lit something inside her, small, hot, defiant. They circled. He did not taunt. He did not gloat. He simply moved, fluid, patient, reading her like an open scroll. When she struck first, a clean diagonal slash meant to test, he stepped inside her guard, caught her wrist mid-motion, and pressed just enough to make her feel the strength behind his restraint. "Too wide," he murmured. Close enough that she smelled cedar and iron on his skin. "You're still fighting like a queen who expects the world to part for her." She twisted free, heart hammering, not from fear, but from the sudden dizzying thrill of being seen so clearly. They began again. Strike, block, pivot, breath, again. Sweat gathered at her temples. Her muscles burned in a way that felt almost holy. Every time he corrected her, gentle pressure on her elbow, a murmured, "Lower your center," a tap against her ribs to show where she had left herself open. Something inside her shifted. Not toward him, not yet. Toward herself. The yard had gone quiet. No jeers, no mockery, only the sound of wood meeting wood, feet scuffing dirt, and the ragged music of two people breathing hard. When she finally landed a clean strike against his forearm, nothing damaging, just enough to make him grunt, Victor smiled. Not the dangerous curve he wore in the bath chamber, a real one, small, proud. "Well done," he said. She lowered the blade. Her arms trembled, her lungs ached, and yet her mouth curved unbidden into an answering smile, tiny, pained, but real. For the first time since the gates of Blackthorn closed behind her, she felt the ghost of joy. They did not speak of it. Instead, he walked her to the edge of the yard where a low stone bench overlooked the mist-wreathed valley. They sat, close enough that their shoulders nearly brushed, far enough that neither had to acknowledge it. Below them, the Shadowfang lands stretched dark and wild. Somewhere beyond those ridges lay Silverclaw territory. Somewhere beyond those ridges, Darius was probably planning his next move, telling himself it was all for the crown, for the pack, for her. Leora's fingers tightened around the hilt of the practice blade she still held. "He wrote to me," she said quietly. "Last night, said it was temporary, said to hold on." Victor did not flinch, did not offer empty comfort. He simply asked, "Do you believe him?" She looked down at the valley for a long time. "I believe he believes it," she answered at last. "That's what makes it hurt most." Silence settled between them, comfortable, not heavy. After a while, Victor spoke again, voice low. "When I was younger, I trusted someone with my name, my blood, my future. She sold it all for a prettier throne and a softer bed. I survived, but I stopped believing in temporary." Leora turned to him. His profile was stark against the rising light, jaw tight, eyes distant. "Is that why you look at me like I might break?" she asked. "No," he met her gaze. "I look at you like you might finally begin." Her breath caught, not because the words were beautiful, though they were, but because they were honest. No seduction, no possession, just truth laid bare in the gray dawn. She felt the ache again, sharp and familiar. But this time it came with something new, a flicker of warmth. Not love, not yet, but possibility, the painful, lovely possibility that she might still be someone worth fighting for. even if the one who should have fought hardest had already walked away. She stood. "I want to train again tomorrow," she said. Victor rose too. "Then you will." As she turned to leave, he spoke once more, soft, almost reluctant. "Leora," she paused. "If you ever decide to send a message back to him," he said, "make it honest. Not for his sake, for yours." She did not answer. She did not need to. She walked back through the corridors with the wooden blade still in her hand, sweat cooling on her skin, heart strangely steady. In her chamber, she set the blade beside the bed. Then she took Darius's note, smoothed it flat, and for the first time, read it without tears. She did not cry. Instead, she smiled, small, sad, secret. And in the quiet of early morning, alone with her own heartbeat, she began to plan. Outside, ravens called across the valley. Somewhere far away, war drums were beginning to sound. Chapter 4. Fractured Alliances. Leora did not send the note back. She folded Darius's letter once more, smaller this time, until it was a tight square no larger than her thumbnail. Then she slipped it beneath the edge of the mattress. Out of sight. Out of reach. Not destroyed. Not yet. She wasn't ready to burn the last thread that still tied her to the man she had once loved beyond reason. But she also wasn't ready to answer it. Morning came again. Colder now, the mist clinging to the valley like a shroud. She returned to the training yard without being summoned. Victor was already there, alone this time, running through a sequence of movements so slow they looked like prayer. His breath clouded in the air. When he saw her, he stopped, lowered his hands, and simply waited. She picked up the same wooden blade from yesterday. They did not speak of the note. They did not speak of anything at first. They only moved. Today the sparring felt different. Less like instruction, more like conversation. Every block, every feint, every shift of weight carried unspoken questions. Why did you stay silent? Why do you keep coming back here? Why does your gaze linger when you think I'm not looking? When she overextended on a thrust and he caught her wrist again, he did not release her immediately. His thumb rested lightly over her pulse point, feeling the frantic beat. Neither of them moved. "You're angry today," he said quietly. "I'm always angry now," she answered. "It's just quieter some days." He let go. She stepped back. They circled once more. After the session ended, both of them breathing hard, skin damp despite the chill, Victor gestured toward a narrow path that led away from the yard, up the slope behind the keep. "Come," he said. She followed. The path wound through pines until it opened onto a small hidden grotto. A spring bubbled from dark rock, feeding a shallow pool no larger than a bed. Ferns clung to the walls. Moss softened every surface. Sunlight pierced the canopy in thin golden spears. It was the most beautiful place she had seen since leaving Silverclaw Lands. Victor sat on a flat stone at the water's edge. After a moment, she joined him. Not too close, but close enough that she could feel the warmth coming off his body. He pulled a small leather pouch from his belt and offered it to her. Inside were dried berries and strips of smoked venison. Simple. Honest. She ate slowly. He watched the water. After a long silence, he spoke. "Last night, one of my scouts intercepted a Silverclaw messenger. Not one of the usual spies. Someone carrying a sealed missive meant for you. It bore the king's personal crest." Leora's hand stilled halfway to her mouth. "He wants a meeting," Victor continued. "Neutral ground. Tomorrow at dusk. The old stone circle on the border ridge. He says he comes alone. He says he comes to explain." Her throat closed. She set the food down untouched. "And what did you do with the messenger?" she asked. "Sent him back with a message of my own. That if the Silverclaw King wants words, he will have them. But only if you agree to hear them." She looked at Victor then. Really looked. His face was unreadable, yet she saw the tension at the corners of his mouth, the faint shadow beneath his eyes. This was not generosity. This was a test. For her. For him. "Why would you allow it?" she whispered. "Because I want to know what you will choose when the path stands in front of you again." The words landed like stones in still water. Ripples spread through her chest, pain, fear, a strange, aching gratitude. She stood and walked to the pool's edge. The water was so clear she could see the pebbles at the bottom, smooth and patient. She crouched, dipped her fingers in. The cold shocked her skin awake. "I loved him," she said, voice so soft it almost disappeared. "I still feel the shape of that love inside me, like a room I used to live in. The furniture is gone, but I remember where everything stood." Victor rose and came to stand beside her, not touching, just near. "When the person who was supposed to guard that room hands the key to strangers," he said, "the room doesn't vanish. It simply changes locks." She looked up at him. Tears stood bright in her eyes, but they did not fall. "I don't know if I can face him," she admitted. "Then don't," he answered simply. "But if you do, go knowing you are not the woman who left. You are the one who came back stronger." She searched his face and found no triumph there, only quiet certainty. Something inside her cracked open, not broken, but released. A small, trembling happiness bloomed in the wreckage of her grief. Not because the pain had vanished, because someone saw it and did not look away. She reached out, slowly, hesitantly, and laid her palm against his forearm. The muscle beneath her hand flexed once, then stilled. His skin was warm, his pulse steady. "Thank you," she whispered. He covered her hand with his own, large, calloused, gentle. They stayed like that for a long time, two silhouettes against the grotto's green heart, breathing in time with the spring. When they finally returned to the keep, the sun was high and the yard was full again. Warriors nodded to her now, not in deference, but in acknowledgement. She had become part of the rhythm here, whether she meant to or not. That night she sat at the narrow window of her chamber, watching the moon rise. She thought of tomorrow, of the stone circle, of Darius's face, the way it used to soften when he looked at her. She thought of Victor's hand over hers in the grotto, steady as stone. She did not sleep. Instead, she wrote, not to Darius, to herself, a single line on a scrap of parchment she would carry tomorrow. "You are not returning to him. You are walking forward through him." When dawn came, she dressed in Shadowfang leathers, dark, fitted, practical. No gown, no crown, just herself. She met Victor at the gate. He studied her for a long moment. "You're going," he said, not a question. "Yes." He nodded once. "Then go with clear eyes," he told her, "and come back with the same." She stepped past him, through the open gate, into the pale morning. Behind her, the keep doors closed with a soft final sound. Ahead lay the ridge, the circle, the man who had once held her entire world. And somewhere deep inside her chest, a small, fierce smile took root. Sad. Yes, still aching with old love, but also bright with the terrible, lovely certainty that she was no longer waiting to be saved. She was choosing. Chapter 5. The Beast Within. Leora did not look back as the gate of Blackthorn Keep shrank behind her. The path to the border ridge was narrow and steep, lined with wind-twisted pines that leaned like old sentinels keeping secrets. Each step upward pulled the air thinner, sharper, until it tasted of iron and coming rain. Her boots found purchase on loose shale. Her breath came steady, deliberate. She carried no weapon beyond the small knife strapped to her thigh and the scrap of parchment tucked against her heart. Her own words to herself, written in the dark. "You are not returning to him. You are walking forward through him." The stone circle appeared at dusk exactly as promised. A ring of 9 weathered monoliths, standing on the crest of the ridge, their surfaces etched with runes older than any living pack. The sky had gone the color of bruised plums. Wind moved through the stones like a sigh. Darius was already there. He stood alone in the center, just as he had said he would. No guards. No banners. Only the man she had once known better than her own reflection. His dark hair was longer now, unkempt. A fresh scar curved along his left cheekbone. Someone else's claws, perhaps. He wore the simple gray cloak of a traveler, but she still saw the king beneath it. Shoulders squared, chin lifted, eyes searching the path until they found her. When she stepped into the circle, the wind fell silent, as though the stones themselves were listening. "Leora," he breathed. The sound of her name in his voice cracked something inside her chest. Soft, sudden, painful. She stopped 5 paces away. He took 1 step toward her, then halted when she did not mirror it. "You came," he said. "I needed to see if the man who wrote that letter still existed." His gaze dropped to the ground between them. "I never stopped existing. I just failed you." The admission hung there, raw and unadorned. No excuses, no royal flourish, just truth, stripped bare. She felt the old love rise like a tide, warm, familiar, heartbreaking, and at the same time the new anger, cold and bright, held it back. They stood in perfect opposition inside her, pulling in different directions until she thought she might tear in half. "I read your words," she said quietly. "Temporary, you called it. Hold on, you said. I meant them. Did you?" Her voice stayed even, but the tremor lived beneath. "When the chains went around my wrists, did you mean them then? When Victor's gates closed behind me, were you still holding on to the promise? Or had you already let go to keep your crown safe?" Darius flinched as though she had struck him. He looked older in that moment, lines carved deeper around his eyes, mouth tight with something that might have been shame. "I told myself it was strategy," he said. "One life traded for thousands, one heart broken to save an entire people. I told myself I would bring you back before the moon turned again. I told myself 1,000 lies so I could sleep at night." He lifted his eyes to hers. They were wet. Not tears. Not yet. But close. "But every night I dreamed of your face when they took you. Every morning I woke tasting ash. I was wrong, Leora. I was so terribly wrong." She wanted to scream. She wanted to run into his arms and let the past swallow them both. She wanted to turn and walk away forever. Instead, she asked the only question that still mattered. "Do you still love me?" The wind picked up again, tugging at her hair, at the edges of his cloak. "With everything I have left," he answered. "Even if it's not enough. Even if you never forgive me." Silence stretched. The stones watched. Then, slowly, she reached into her tunic and drew out the folded parchment, his letter. She held it between them like an offering, or perhaps a verdict. "I carried this the whole way here," she said. "Not because I believed it anymore, because I needed to remember what belief felt like before it broke." She opened her fingers. The wind caught the small square and lifted it, spinning it upward like a pale moth before it disappeared over the ridge. Darius watched it go. His shoulders sagged, just a fraction. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said softly. "I only wanted you to know I'm still fighting. For our people, yes, but mostly for the right to look you in the eye again one day without flinching." She studied him, really studied him. The scar, the exhaustion, the stubborn hope still flickering behind the guilt. And something inside her shifted, not back to the woman who had trusted him with her life, not forward into blind vengeance, sideways, into something quieter, something truer. "I'm not coming back," she told him. The words came out gentle, almost kind. "Not the way you want, not the way we were." He nodded once slowly as though he had already known. "But I'm not your enemy either," she continued. "Not yet. Maybe never. That depends on what you do next." She took 1 step closer, not to embrace, but to make sure he heard every syllable. "If you raise your army against Blackthorn, if you come for me like a prize to be reclaimed, then yes, I will become the storm you created. But if you choose differently, if you choose peace, if you choose to be the king I once believed you could be, then perhaps there is still a path where we don't destroy each other." Darius swallowed. "And if I choose peace? Then you start by dismantling the lie that your crown is worth more than the people wearing it. You start by listening to the Pax who never wanted this war. You start by remembering that a king without honor is only a man wearing metal." He looked at her for a long time. "I'm trying," he whispered. "I swear to every moon I've ever howled under, I'm trying." She believed him, not because the words were perfect, because they were broken, honest, human. A small, sad smile touched her lips. The same one that had begun in the training yard, in the grotto, in the quiet hours alone. It hurt. It also felt like breathing after too long underwater. "I have to go back now," she said. He nodded again. "Will I see you again?" "I don't know." She turned then, not in anger, not in haste, but with the calm of someone who had finally chosen her own direction. As she walked down the ridge, the first stars appeared above the stones. The wind carried the faint, distant howl of a lone wolf, not Silverclaw, not Shadowfang. Just a voice in the dark, calling to no one and everyone. Leora lifted her face to the sky and answered with a low, soft sound of her own. Not rage, not grief, but something fiercer. Acceptance, and beneath it, rising like dawn through mist, a bright, trembling joy. She was no longer waiting for anyone to define her worth. She was becoming it. Behind her, Darius remained in the circle until she was gone from sight. Then he sank to one knee, pressed his forehead to the cold stone, and, for the first time since the night he lost her, let the tears come. Chapter 6. Eclipse of the Heart. The tunnel entrance waited beneath the overturned boulder, like a secret the earth had kept too long. Leora led them to it in near silence, her steps sure even in the pitch dark that swallowed the ridge after moonset. No stars tonight. Clouds thick as grief had rolled in, blotting out the silver light Isabella had come to rely on like breath. They crouched together behind a fallen log while Leora worked the hidden catch, old iron groaning as the boulder shifted just enough to reveal a narrow black mouth in the hillside. Damp air wafted out, carrying the faint mineral scent of underground springs and forgotten stone. "Through here," Leora whispered. "It opens under the elder quarters. Grandmother's room is the third door on the left past the root cellar. The book should still be in the hollow under the floorboards. She never trusted the Alpha with her old writings." Victor nodded once. His hand found Isabella's in the dark, fingers lacing without hesitation. The contact grounded her. Even without moonlight, she could feel the steady thrum of his pulse matching hers, two hearts refusing to surrender rhythm. They slipped inside one by one. The tunnel sloped downward, walls slick with condensation. Isabella moved between Victor and Leora, senses sharpened by the lunar gift even in total absence of light. Every drip echoed like a heartbeat. Every scuff of boot on stone felt amplified, dangerous. Halfway down, the first tremor hit. Not sound, not movement at first. Just a sudden hollow ache behind her breastbone, as if someone had reached inside and squeezed. Isabella stumbled, catching herself against the damp wall. Victor was at her side in an instant, arm around her waist. "What is it?" he breathed. "The moon," she managed. "It's dimming. I can feel it pulling away." Leora turned back, eyes wide in the faint glow of the single small lantern she'd risked. "The eclipse. It started an hour ago. I forgot. Tonight's the blood moon eclipse. The pack always gathers for it. They think it strengthens the curse." Isabella pressed a hand to her chest. The fire that had lived in her veins since resurrection flickered, unsteady. Not gone, but muted, like a flame behind thick glass. Her knees weakened. The tunnel seemed to tilt. Victor caught her fully now, pulling her against him so her back rested on his chest. "Breathe," he murmured into her hair. "I've got you." She closed her eyes, focusing on the solid warmth of him, the rise and fall of his breathing against her spine. Even with her power faltering, the bond between them held, fierce, unbroken. It hurt in the sweetest way, the reminder that love could still reach her when everything else dimmed. "I'm scared," she admitted, so quietly only he could hear. "Not of them. Of losing this. Of waking up tomorrow and finding the moon took back what it gave me. What if I'm just ordinary again? What if I can't fight?" Victor turned her gently to face him in the narrow passage. His hands framed her face, thumbs brushing her cheekbones. In the lantern's weak light, his eyes looked almost silver, reflecting every fear she wouldn't voice. "Then we fight ordinary," he said, voice low and fierce. "You and me. No curse. No immortality. Just two people who refuse to let go. I'd choose that over eternity without you every single time." A tear slipped free. She didn't wipe it away. Instead, she leaned her forehead against his, breathing him in. Pine, sweat, the faint metallic tang of fear. "You always knew how to make the impossible sound simple." "Because with you it is," he answered. "Even now." Leora cleared her throat softly from a few steps ahead. "We have maybe 20 minutes before the eclipse peaks. After that, the pack will be distracted, praying, feeding the curse. It's our only window." Isabella straightened, drawing strength from Victor's steady gaze. She nodded. "Then let's not waste it." They moved faster now, the tunnel narrowing until they had to crawl the last stretch. When it finally opened into the root cellar beneath the elder quarters, the air changed. Warmer, heavier with the scent of old wood and herbs long dried. Leora led them up a short ladder to a narrow corridor. They passed 2 doors before reaching the third. She eased it open. Grandmother's room was untouched. Dust lay thick on every surface, but the small bed was still neatly made, the quilt folded with care. Moonlight should have spilled through the single high window, but the eclipse had turned it to dull charcoal. Victor went straight to the floorboards near the hearth. He pried one up with careful fingers. Beneath lay a leather-bound book, edges worn soft by years of hands. He lifted it reverently, passing it to Isabella without opening it. She cradled it against her chest. The leather felt warm, almost alive. "This is it," she whispered. "The severance rite." Leora watched from the doorway, expression unreadable. "You'll need a circle of 3 to perform it. Willing hearts, no blood, just surrender." Isabella met her eyes. "You'd do that? Stand with us?" Leora hesitated only a second. "I already have." Victor placed a hand on Isabella's shoulder. "Then we have our 3. For a moment, the room held only the sound of their breathing. 3 people who had chosen differently, who had chosen each other over everything they'd been taught to value. Then the ground trembled again, deeper this time. A distant chant rose from somewhere above, low, rhythmic, the pack invoking the eclipse's power. Isabella felt another pull at her core, sharper now. Her knees buckled. Victor caught her before she fell, lowering them both to the floorboards. "Easy," he murmured, holding her close. "Ride it out. I'm right here." She clutched the book between them like an anchor. Tears came freely now, not from pain, but from the overwhelming clarity of it all. How close they'd come to losing everything. How fragile and precious this moment was. "I love you," she whispered against his neck. "Even when the moon forgets me. Even if I forget myself." Victor pressed his lips to her temple. "I love you back. Always have. Always will." Leora knelt beside them, silent witness, hand resting lightly on Isabella's arm, a quiet promise of solidarity. Above them the chanting swelled, reaching a fevered peak. And then silence. The eclipse had reached totality. In that perfect dark, Isabella felt the last flicker of lunar fire gutter low, but not out. Not yet, because the 3 of them sat together in the shadows of a forgotten room, hearts laid bare, refusing to break. And somewhere in the den above, the Alpha paused mid-chant, nostrils flaring at a scent he hadn't expected. Betrayal. Closer than ever. Chapter 7, Vengeful Tides. The silence after the eclipse's peak was deafening, thicker than the darkness that still pressed against the high window. Isabella remained on the floorboards, cradled in Victor's arms, the severance book heavy between them like a shared heartbeat. Leora stayed kneeling nearby, eyes fixed on the door as if expecting it to burst open at any second. Above them, the chanting had fractured into murmurs, then footsteps, scattered at first, then purposeful. The pack was stirring from their ritual trance. Isabella could feel the shift in the air even without her full lunar strength. Tension coiling, sense sharpening, the Alpha's presence rising like a storm front. Victor's hold tightened fractionally. "We can't stay here," he whispered. "They'll sweep the elder quarters soon." Isabella nodded against his chest. She felt fragile, hollowed out, but not empty. The eclipse had stolen the fire's blaze, yet a quiet ember remained, banked and stubborn. She lifted her head, meeting his gaze in the faint charcoal light. "We take the book and go," she said. "We find a place to read it properly, understand it. Then we come back when we're ready." Leora rose silently. "There's a back stair, narrow, unused. Leads to the surface near the western ridge. I can guide you out." Victor helped Isabella to her feet. She swayed once, then steadied herself against him. Their eyes locked again, longer this time. No words, just the unspoken vow that whatever waited beyond this room, they would meet it side by side. They moved like shadows, Leora first, then Isabella with the book clutched to her chest, Victor bringing up the rear. The back stair was little more than a ladder of worn stone steps, hidden behind a false panel in the wall. They climbed single file, breath held, every creak of wood or shift of dust feeling like a shout. Halfway up, Isabella paused. A wave of dizziness rolled through her again, stronger, colder. She pressed her palm to the stone wall, steadying herself. Victor was there in an instant, hand on her lower back. "Talk to me," he murmured. "It's not just the eclipse," she said quietly. "It's memories. They're coming back sharper now that the fire's low. The grave, the dirt, your face above me when they closed the lid." Her voice trembled. "I keep seeing it, feeling it, and I hate that it still hurts this much." Victor turned her gently to face him on the narrow stair. Leora waited a few steps above, giving them space without leaving. "I see it too," he admitted, voice raw. "Every night since. I wake up tasting soil. I wake up reaching for you and finding nothing." He rested his forehead against hers. "I would give anything to undo that moment. Anything." Isabella closed her eyes. "I know you would. That's why it hurts more. Because I believe you." A single tear slipped down her cheek. He caught it with his thumb, then pressed his lips to the spot. Soft, lingering. Not a kiss of passion, but of quiet devotion. She let herself lean into him for 3 heartbeats, drawing strength from the solid warmth of his body, the familiar scent that still meant safety even after everything. When she pulled back, her eyes were clearer. "We keep going," she said. "Not because the moon demands it anymore, because we do." Victor nodded once, fierce and certain. They continued upward. The stair ended at a small grate half buried in ivy. Leora pushed it open carefully. Cool night air rushed in, post-eclipse, moon beginning to re-emerge in thin silver slivers. They slipped out onto the western ridge, crouching low among boulders. Below them the den glowed faintly, torches relit, figures moving between cabins. The Alpha stood at the center of the clearing, head raised, sniffing the wind. Even from this distance, Isabella felt his gaze sweep past their hiding place like a blade. Leora pointed north. "There's a shallow cave system half a mile that way, dry, hidden by falls. We can rest, read the book." Isabella looked at Victor. "You're hurt," she said softly, noticing for the first time the dark stain spreading across his sleeve, blood from a reopened gash during their escape. He glanced down, surprised. "It's nothing." "It's not nothing." She touched the fabric lightly. "Let me see." They moved deeper into the trees, finding a small overhang where moonlight filtered through in pale ribbons. Victor sat against the rock. Isabella knelt in front of him, gently rolling back the sleeve. The wound was ugly, jagged, still weeping, but not deep enough to kill. Leora handed her a strip torn from her own shirt. Isabella worked in careful silence, cleaning the cut with water from a nearby trickle, then binding it with steady hands. Victor watched her the entire time, eyes never leaving her face. When she finished, she rested her palm over the bandage. "You're allowed to hurt too," she said quietly. "You don't have to carry it all alone anymore." Victor covered her hand with his. "I've spent too long pretending I didn't feel anything. I'm done with that." She smiled, small, tired but real. "Good, because I'm not letting you hide from me again." Leora watched from a respectful distance, then spoke softly. "The book. We should look at it now while we have quiet." Isabella opened the leather cover. The pages smelled of old ink and lavender. Grandmother's handwriting was elegant, precise. Sketches of lunar phases, symbols Isabella recognized from childhood stories. Notes in the margins about balance, surrender, choice. They read together by slivers of returning moonlight. The severance rite was simple in theory, devastating in weight. 3 willing souls standing in a circle at the next full moon. No blood spilled, no life taken. Only the deliberate release of what the moon had granted. Power, longevity, the curse itself. The rite demanded honesty above all. Each participant must name what they were willing to lose and what they hoped to gain. Isabella traced the final line with her finger. "It says the moon will answer, not with fire or vengeance, with clarity, a chance to begin again." Victor exhaled slowly. "Then that's what we do." Leora looked between them. "I'll stand with you, whatever comes." Isabella closed the book. She looked up at the sky, moon growing brighter by the minute, as if listening. "Thank you," she said to both of them, "for choosing this, for choosing me." Victor lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a soft kiss to her knuckles. "We're choosing us." The moment held, quiet, profound, laced with the bittersweet knowledge that everything they'd known was ending, and something new was beginning. Then a twig snapped in the trees behind them. Not distant, close. Victor rose first, pulling Isabella up with him. Leora shifted instinctively into half-form, ears pricked. A figure stepped from the shadows, not an enforcer, not the alpha. Another scout, younger, eyes wide with fear and decision. "I saw you leave," he whispered. "I didn't tell, but others are coming. Fast." Isabella felt the ember inside her flare, just enough. The tide was turning, but the hunters were already in the water. Chapter 8. Howls of Desire. The young scout's eyes darted between the 3 of them, wide and glassy in the returning moonlight. His chest rose and fell too fast. Fear, yes, but also something fiercer. Decision made and already regretted. "They're coming from the East Ridge," he whispered. 3 enforcers. The Alpha sent them himself. Said if they find you, bring back pieces. Victor stepped forward, placing himself slightly in front of Isabella without blocking her. "You didn't have to warn us," he said quietly. "You could have run back and kept your place." The scout swallowed. "I saw her rise from the grave, from the moon itself. If the curse can be broken, I want to know what life looks like without it." Isabella felt the ember inside her stir again, small but steady. She studied the boy's face, barely past his first full shift, still carrying the softness of someone who hadn't yet learned to bury hope. "What's your name?" she asked. "Jasper," he answered, almost too soft to hear. She nodded once. "Stay low. Stay quiet. If you change your mind, we won't chase you. But if you stay with us." Jasper gave a jerky nod. Leora moved first. "We can't outrun them on foot, not with the eclipse still weakening you." She glanced at Isabella. "But there's a clearing 1/2 mile north, the one with the standing stones. Old ritual ground. Grandmother used to say the moon remembers places like that. Even during an eclipse, the echo lingers." Victor looked at Isabella. In his eyes, she saw the question he didn't voice. "Are you strong enough?" She answered by stepping past him, book still clutched to her chest. "We go to the clearing. If the moon remembers, then let it remember me." They moved. The forest seemed to hold its breath as they ran. Jasper now trailing close behind, silent and determined. Branches clawed at their arms. Roots tried to trip them. Isabella felt every step like a reminder of her body's limits without the full lunar blaze. Yet the bond with Victor pulsed stronger in the quiet. His presence beside her a constant, warm current that made the ache bearable. They reached the clearing just as the first distant howl split the night. The standing stones rose in a rough circle. 9 gray monoliths, weathered smooth by centuries, moss clinging to their bases like old memories. Moonlight poured down now, thin but growing, painting the grass silver. The eclipse was ending. The moon was returning to full view. Isabella walked to the center without hesitation. The others followed, forming a loose triangle around her. Victor to her right, Leora to her left, Jasper hesitating before taking the final point. She opened the book to the Severance Rite page. Grandmother's words stared back at her in careful script. 3 hearts, 1 circle. Speak what you release, speak what you claim. The moon listens. Isabella closed her eyes. The wind moved through the stones like a sigh. I release the vengeance, she said, voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. I release the grave's weight, the dirt in my lungs, the betrayal that still stings like salt in a wound. I claim choice. The right to love without fear. The right to live without being someone else's secret. Silence followed, deep, listening silence. Victor spoke next. His voice cracked on the first word, then steadied. I release the cowardice that kept my mouth shut when it mattered most. I release the alpha's shadow that made me choose pack over heart. I claim forgiveness. From her. From myself. And the chance to stand beside her, not behind her. Leora's turn. She looked smaller in the moonlight, but her voice carried clear. I release the loyalty that blinded me, the comfort of silence when someone was screaming under the earth. I claim courage, the kind that doesn't wait for permission. Jasper was last. His voice shook. I release nothing yet. I don't know what to let go of, but I claim hope. That maybe there's more to being a wolf than teeth and obedience. The words hung in the air. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the stones began to hum. Low, resonant, like a chord struck deep in the earth. Moonlight brightened, pooling in the center of the circle, gathering around Isabella's feet like liquid silver. She gasped as warmth flooded her, not the fierce burn of resurrection, but something gentler, clearer. Her body trembled. Memories flashed. The first time Victor smiled at her across a bonfire. The way his hand had felt in hers that night by the stream. The terror of suffocation. The joy of clawing free. All of it present, none of it erased. She felt the shift begin, not in power, but in possibility. And then the howl came again, closer, angrier. The enforcers had found them. Victor moved to her side instantly, hand finding hers. We're not done, he said. Isabella looked at him. Really looked. The moonlight caught the scar on his cheek, the quiet determination in his eyes, the way he stood ready to face anything as long as she was beside him. She smiled, small, sad, radiant. No, she agreed. We're just beginning. The first enforcer burst from the trees, half shifted, fangs bared, eyes locked on her. But before he could charge, the standing stones flared brighter. A pulse of light rippled outward, not destructive, not vengeful, simply undeniable. The enforcer stumbled, shifting back to human form against his will, confusion replacing rage. One by one the others emerged, 3 more, only to freeze as the same light touched them. Isabella stepped forward, still holding Victor's hand. This ends tonight, she said, voice carrying across the clearing like moonlight on water. Not with blood, with truth. The enforcers stared at her, at the woman they'd buried, now standing unbroken in a circle of light. One of them dropped to his knees. Another followed. The third looked to the sky, tears tracking down his face as the full moon emerged completely from the eclipse's shadow. Jasper let out a soft, astonished sound. Leora reached out and touched one of the stones, as if anchoring herself to the moment. Victor squeezed Isabella's hand. And in that suspended heartbeat, the pack's oldest curse felt the first real crack. But high on the ridge above the clearing, a single silhouette watched. Tall, unmoving. The Alpha. He did not move to stop them. Not yet. He only tilted his head, as if listening to something only he could hear. Then he turned and vanished into the trees, leaving the night to hold its breath once more. Chapter 9. Moonlit Reckoning. The enforcers remained frozen in the clearing's silver wash, knees pressed to the grass, faces tilted toward the stones as though the moonlight itself had pinned them there. No one moved to attack. No one even growled. The hum from the standing stones lingered in the air like a held breath, gentle but unyielding. Isabella stood at the circle's heart, Victor's hand still warm in hers. Leora and Jasper flanked them, silent sentinels. The young scout's eyes were wide with something close to awe. Leora's expression held quiet wonder laced with grief. From the ridge above, the Alpha's silhouette had vanished, but Isabella felt him still. A distant pressure at the edges of her mind, like thunder waiting to break. He hadn't fled. He was watching, waiting for the moment the right faltered. She turned slowly to the kneeling enforcers. "You can stand," she said, voice calm and clear. "The light isn't holding you prisoner, it's only asking you to remember." One by one they rose, slow, uncertain, as though their own bodies had become unfamiliar. The tallest among them, a broad-shouldered man named Calder, who had once carried firewood to Isabella's cabin when she was still just the pack's adopted daughter, spoke first. "We buried you," he rasped. "I carried the shovel. I told myself it was for the pack, for survival." Isabella met his gaze without flinching. "I know." Calder's throat worked. "I dream about it. Every night since. I see your hands scratching at the wood. I hear you call his name." His eyes flicked to Victor, then dropped. "I thought I was protecting something bigger than myself. I was wrong." The others murmured agreement, low, broken sounds that carried more weight than any howl. Victor stepped forward half a pace. "The rite isn't finished," he said, "but it's begun. The curse is cracking. You felt it. You still feel it. You can choose now. Keep holding the old chains or help us break them for good." Calder looked at his hands as though seeing them for the first time. "The Alpha won't let this stand." "No," Isabella agreed softly. "He won't." She lifted the severance book, its pages catching moonlight like water. "But he doesn't have to win with teeth and fear anymore. Grandmother wrote that the moon remembers promises kept in honesty. Not blood, not obedience. Honesty." A new sound rose then. Not a howl, not a growl. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate. The Alpha emerged from the tree line at the clearing's edge. Alone. No enforcers at his back. No shift rippling across his frame. Just a man. Tall, silver-haired, eyes the same piercing green as his son's, but colder, older, carved by decades of choices no one else had been asked to bear. He stopped just outside the circle of stones. The moonlight seemed to bend around him, reluctant to touch. "You think this ends with words?" His voice carried across the grass, deep, measured, carrying the weight of command even without raised volume. "You think a few pretty lines from a dead woman's book can unmake what generations built?" Isabella stepped toward him, still holding Victor's hand. The others moved with her instinctively, forming a loose line. "I think it already has," she answered. "You felt the crack the same as they did. You're here because you're afraid it will widen." The Alpha's gaze settled on her, long, searching. For a moment something flickered behind the ice in his eyes. Recognition? Regret? It vanished before she could name it. "You are human," he said quietly. "You were never meant to carry our burden. When you saw the sacrifice, you should have run. Instead, you tried to change us." "I loved you," Isabella said simply. "All of you. Enough to want better." His jaw tightened. "Love is a luxury wolves cannot afford." Victor spoke then. Voice steady despite the tremor Isabella felt travel through their joined hands. "Then stop being wolves who only know how to bite," he said. Be fathers. Be brothers. Be men who can look their children in the eye and not see shame reflected back. The Alpha looked at his son. Really looked. For the first time in years, the mask of command slipped, revealing raw exhaustion beneath. You would throw away immortality, he said. Eternal strength, the pack's survival. I would throw away a survival built on stolen lives, Victor answered. I already did the night I let them bury her. I've been dead inside since. This. He lifted their joined hands slightly. This is the first time I've felt alive again. Silence stretched, long enough that the wind had time to move through the standing stones once more, sighing like an old mourner. The Alpha's gaze shifted to the book in Isabella's other hand. Show me, he said at last. She opened it to the final page, held it out. He crossed the distance slowly, boots silent on the grass. When he reached her, he did not take the book. He only read over her shoulder, eyes tracing the familiar handwriting of his own mother. Minutes passed. When he finally lifted his head, his expression was unreadable. If we do this, he said, the pack fractures. Some will leave, some will fight. Hunters will come, real ones, not just rumors. We become mortal, vulnerable. Yes, Isabella said. He looked at her then. Not as a threat, not as a ghost returned to haunt him, but as a woman who had survived what he had ordered. And you would still stand in this circle with us? He asked. With you, she corrected gently, if you choose it. The Alpha exhaled, a long, shuddering sound that carried every year of weight he had carried alone. He stepped back one pace, then another. Not retreat, surrender. I release the pact, he said, voice breaking on the words. I release the blood debt my father taught me to collect. I release the lie that immortality justifies cruelty. He looked at Victor. I release my son from my shadow. Victor's breath caught. Tears shimmered in his eyes, but did not fall. The Alpha turned to the enforcers, to Calder, to the others who had begun to gather at the clearing's edge, drawn by the light, by the silence, by something deeper than command. Those who wish to stay in the old ways, he said, leave now. No punishment, no pursuit. Go. A handful moved, slow, uncertain, melting into the trees. The rest stayed. The Alpha looked back at Isabella. The right, he said. Finish it. She nodded. Together, more than 3 now, but the circle still held, they spoke the final words grandmother had written. Not a spell, a promise. When the last syllable faded, the standing stones flared once, bright, blinding, then dimmed to ordinary moonlight. No explosion, no thunder, just clarity. The curse lifted like fog burning off a lake at dawn. Isabella felt it leave her. Not as loss, but as release. The lunar fire that had once burned vengeful became something quieter. Warmth, memory, choice. She looked at Victor. He looked back, and in that shared glance was every tear, every scream, every stolen kiss, every apology never spoken until tonight. They stepped toward each other. Foreheads touched. Breaths mingled. No words, only the lovely, aching certainty that they had survived the worst, and chosen each other through it. Behind them, the Alpha sank to one knee, not in defeat, but in quiet acceptance. The pack watched in silence, and high above, the full moon shone steady, as though it had been waiting all along for them to finally listen. But in the deepest part of the forest, far from the clearing, a new scent drifted on the wind. Not wolf, not human, something older, something watching. The severance was complete, yet the night still held one final secret. Chapter 10. Eternal Embrace. The clearing held its breath as the last echoes of the rite faded into the night. Moonlight pooled around the standing stones like spilled silver, soft now, almost tender. The enforcers who had knelt rose slowly, shoulders loosening as though invisible chains had finally dropped away. Calder touched his own throat, as if surprised to find no growl rising unbidden. Others looked at their hands, their faces, ordinary skin, ordinary eyes yet somehow brighter. The Alpha remained on one knee at the circle's edge. He did not rise immediately. His silver hair caught the light, his shoulders once rigid with command, curved inward with something that looked very much like relief. Isabella stepped toward him first. Victor moved with her, their fingers still threaded together, a quiet anchor. She stopped a respectful distance away. "You kept the promise your mother wrote," she said gently. "That matters more than any title you ever held." The Alpha lifted his head. His eyes, once sharp as winter ice, were wet now, reflecting the moon in fractured pieces. "I spent decades believing strength meant never bending," he murmured. "I taught my son the same. Look what it cost us." Victor's throat worked. He took one step closer. "It cost us everything we were afraid to lose. And now we have a chance to find what we never knew we needed." The Alpha studied his son for a long moment, really studied him. Then slowly he rose, not as Alpha, just as a father. He crossed the remaining space and placed a hand on Victor's shoulder. The touch was careful, almost hesitant. "I was wrong," he said. The words came out rough, unused. "About the sacrifices. About the curse. About you." His gaze shifted to Isabella. "Most of all about you." Isabella felt the last knot in her chest loosen. She reached out and covered the Alpha's hand with her own. The three of them. Connected now, father, son, the woman who had once been buried by their fear and resurrected by something greater. "I forgive you," she said quietly. "Not because it erases what happened, but because carrying hate any longer would only keep me in the grave." A tear slipped down the Alpha's cheek. He did not wipe it away. Instead, he bowed his head once, deep, genuine, then stepped back, giving them the circle. The pack gathered closer now. Not in ranks, not in obedience, just people, wolves no longer bound by blood, debt, watching with quiet wonder as the night settled into something new. Victor turned to Isabella. The moonlight painted her in soft strokes. Mud still streaked across her cheek from the long escape, hair tangled with leaves and starlight, eyes bright with everything she had carried and refused to let break her. He lifted both hands to her face, thumbs brushing away the last traces of dirt and tears. "I love you," he said, voice low enough that only she could hear. "Not because the moon made you strong, not because you came back, because you never stopped seeing me, even when I couldn't see myself." Isabella's smile trembled at the edges, sad for every lost moment, radiant for everyone they still had ahead. "I love you back," she whispered. "Through the dark, through the light, through every stupid, beautiful mistake we made along the way." They leaned in together. Foreheads touched first, gentle, grounding. Then noses brushed, small smiling contact. Then lips. The kiss was slow, reverent, full, of every unsaid apology and every unspoken promise. No rush, no desperation. Just the quiet certainty of two people who had walked through death and betrayal and chosen again and again to reach for each other. When they parted, breaths mingling, Victor rested his forehead against hers once more. "Whatever comes next," he murmured, "we face it together." "Together," she echoed. Behind them, the pack began to disperse, not scattering, but drifting toward the den in small groups, voices low with questions and tentative hope. Leora found Jasper near the stones. She placed a hand on his shoulder, and the boy leaned into it, exhausted but smiling. Calder lingered longest, looking back at the Alpha with something like understanding before turning away. The Alpha remained at the clearing's edge a moment longer. He looked at the moon, full, steady, no longer a taskmaster but simply a witness. Then he looked at his son and Isabella, still wrapped in each other's arms. A small, tired smile touched his lips. He turned and walked into the trees alone. Not in defeat, in peace. Victor and Isabella stayed in the clearing until the moon began its slow descent toward morning. They sat together on the grass between two stones, backs against one another's shoulders, the severance book resting open on her lap like a shared memory. The forest around them felt different, lighter, as though the weight of centuries had finally lifted. No more sacrifices, no more hiding, just life, fragile, mortal, beautiful. Victor traced lazy circles on the back of her hand with his thumb. "Do you feel it?" he asked softly. She nodded. "Free." They stayed like that, until the first birds began to call, and the eastern sky turned the palest rose. Then they rose together, hand in hand. They walked back toward the den, not as ghosts, not as rebels, but as two people who had rewritten their own story. Behind them, the standing stone stood silent. Above them, the moon watched one last time before slipping below the horizon, and far away, Deep in the oldest part of the forest, where no pack trail ever reached, a low, unfamiliar growl answered the dawn. Not wolf, not human, something ancient stirring at last. The severance had ended one curse, but the world still held others. Victor squeezed Isabella's hand. She squeezed back. Whatever waited in the shadows, they would meet it smiling, together. If this tale of buried secrets, moonlit resurrection, and love that refuses to stay dead stirred something deep inside you, if you felt the ache of betrayal and the quiet thrill of second chances, if you smiled through tears when two broken hearts finally chose each other over fear, then don't let the moonlight fade just yet. They buried her alive to protect their pack's secret, but the moon resurrected her with vengeance in her veins, with someone who needs to remember that even the darkest grave can become a doorway, that love can survive what should have killed it, that sometimes the most powerful vengeance isn't destruction. It's choosing to live louder, love fiercer, and forgive deeper than anyone thought possible. Drop a comment below. Which moment broke your heart the most? Which line made you believe again? Who in your life needs to hear this story right now? Tag a friend who's ever crawled out of their own darkness. Share it on your stories, your feed, your group chats. Let the moon's quiet rebellion spread. Because stories like this don't end when the last episode closes. They begin again every time someone reads them and decides, I'm still here, and I'm choosing to rise. The pack may have changed, but the howl lives on. Your turn. What will you do with your second chance?